Hi guys, I'm Mike.
And I'm Ash.
And this is F1 Fanatics. So guys, here it is, a little bit later in the week than usual. But you know, we've got a summer break, so we felt there wasn't really any too much rush.
No, especially as it wasn't as if we were like having the double header where we had to get both review, preview films same week. So,
but it's still in the same week. It's still here. We know you guys obviously have been eagerly anticipating our race review. So I think first of all, I'll put it up in terms of the classifications of race finishers. We had Lewis Hamilton with a fantastic drive. Number 1, we had Max Verstappen coming in at solid number 2. Those tyres just wouldn't last him to the end.
No.
And number 3, another podium for Sebastian Vettel. Is he on the rise again, or is he just kind of the favourite of a team that kind of is all built around him? There. Leclerc 4. Then Mr. Best of the Rest, as Ashley put it on Sunday's race reaction. He's well and truly won that battle. Is he now considered in that bracket of drivers above? And Pierre Gasly, 6. I mean, it's where you expect him to finish, but behind Sainz and behind a very slow Ferrari package. Right, I suppose there's only one place to start off with, Ash, and that is
front of the pack.
Front of the pack.
Hamilton and Verstappen. Well, interesting battle, and I think on the balance it probably went the right way in terms of the fastest package actually winning the race. Was it the result I wanted? Yes, I like Mercedes and I like Hamilton. But for Formula 1, I did want a Max Verstappen win. I think we, looking back at, we both said it after we filmed the race preview, we're like, hang on a minute, the team that have been dominant in not only this season, but we kind of really didn't mention in our preview, although we both then talked about it going, it was more hope that the other teams would do well. We said about it the fact that actually the main reason why we had discounted Mercedes was to do with the predicted weather. It was meant to be a really hot weekend.
Yeah. And
there was still that unknown with the cooling issue because of not actually seeing any warm weather racing in Germany. So it wasn't understandable. Like the track is a perfect one for the Mercedes car. Like the combination of corners within it and not having too many majorly long straights did suit the Mercedes car. It was just the fact the weather was supposed to be incredibly hot, which didn't happen. Yeah, by having that cooler weekend, it did mean that Mercedes were able to get, well, almost the best out of their car completely for the weekend. But it did mean we had a great battle.
We had a great battle. We certainly did. And that's what we want to see. They are... Well, with how Vettel's downturn of form is, although he is looking like he's getting back, but that Ferrari package just isn't good enough to compete on as many circuits as the Red Bull and Mercedes. We've got the top 2 drivers competing for the race win, and it was superb. The on-track Max Verstappen's defending in that first kind of stint of defending was really good from Hamilton. The way he positioned his car going into corners, and the way that he just was so calm under pressure, because Hamilton, it was hammer time. He was pushing down, he was trying to get every little thing, force him into a mistake that we have seen Vettel crumble in that sort of situation, but Verstappen stood strong.
Well, it's a word that we've used to describe Max Verstappen a lot, but it was the maturity. Yeah. When you think the rule with defending that you can only make one defensive move and then back to the racing line was brought in because of Max Verstappen. It is the Verstappen rule. As much as the FIA have come out and said that it wasn't
it's very
solely
Verstappen.
it is the Verstappen rule, and there wasn't any of that. It was a very controlled defensive drive.
He's got smarter.
He has, and
Certainly.
he was positioning his car as you would expect. There wasn't any of that where he was going slightly offline and then having to correct. He maintained the correct positioning on a track that is notoriously difficult to overtake on. There are opportunities to, but on the whole it is a difficult circuit to find them. But you can't take away from that defensive drive. If that had been, say, I'm trying to think, going back, say a Mansell-esque defensive performance, then there'd be a lot more being said about it. I think the main thing that's come away from the weekend was the Red Bull strategy in terms of the pit stops that has almost taken a little bit of gloss off of the defensive performance from Max.
And although his defensive performance was good, and it was good, this is what I've been having a discussion. I think I did mention it in maybe the podcast last night that we'd go into a little deeper. I gave Max a 9 out of 10 in my driver's rating for one reason, and that was his tyre management. And although it's incredibly harsh, and it was an incredible defensive drive and everything, but you see that gap of 6 laps that Hamilton was able to make his tyres last longer.
Definitely.
If he went that long, he wins the race.
Definitely, and you haven't even just got to look at it in comparison to Hamilton's performance with his tyre management. You can also look at the fact that Vettel was able to extend his first stint as well. So
we'll chat about Ferraris because I think that's worth a note because it's not been spoken about. That was an incredible stint from Vettel.
It was, and it is something we'll obviously discuss a bit more. But right through the grid, there was, I would say, at least 4 or 5 drivers who managed their tyres better than Max Verstappen did. So that's probably the only downside to his driving performance for the weekend, and it is something that he will work on. And the Red Bull hasn't been the kindest of cars on its tyres all season, so
Pierre Gasly did also moan about lack of grip in that race. I mean, and I think everybody else moaned about a lack of pace, but from Gasly. But that Red Bull car isn't the kindest on tyres, but it is those sort of fine margins, and it's the difference between winning or losing and being in a very faint hope of the championship. And I think we all agree now that Verstappen was the informed driver, and he probably still is. But Lewis is still, with that racecraft and experience, is the best driver on the grid, and used that experience in that race, and that was what got him past him.
He did, and I think the experience was the thing that made that final stint what it was. If you were to say put that sort of pressure, because it was pressure what Mercedes were asking him to do, on to Valtteri Bottas, you wouldn't have got that result. If it had been switched and it had been Valtteri Bottas in Hamilton's position,
no chance.
No chance of that happening. If it had been Max Verstappen chasing Hamilton, I still don't think he would have got the same result overall.
Because I think he would have been harder on those tyres. Because the main thing, speaking about, we might as well, it was just what a strategy call it was from Mercedes.
It was, and it was a risky strategy, but it was also one that
It was risky, but also risk-free.
exactly.
Because the worst that could happen was they finished second.
Yeah,
And where they were, they probably were still going to finish second.
that's the thing, and we'll discuss it when we discuss Pierre Gasly, but there were so many things that could have been done to have avoided the situation we had. But I'm going to say I was disappointed by Red Bull.
Yeah, and we're going to have different views on it. So this is good because we get our discussion. But we'll first talk about. I'm going to defend Lewis here because obviously we have. I would say we like teams, but we're not necessarily too attached to one team. I think we're just F1 fans. We want to just see a good race. And we appreciate good driving from there.
We'll be honest, we've got limited team tops at the moment, and that's the reason why the same ones.
We're circulating.
Yeah, that's the reason why they keep popping up.
There'll be some new tops soon, maybe. But Lewis was getting flack, like going, and people were underestimating how good they're going. It's easy when he's got the fastest car, and I'm like going, and I think I've said it. This might be the third video in a row that I've said it, but I think it just needs to be emphasised this point. Just because Lewis Hamilton makes something look easy does not mean that it is easy. Putting in those back-to-back 20 quali laps was an outstanding bit of driving, and I said it with Zach last night. I went, he was my driver of the day.
Well, what I would say to that is he has got the best car this season in terms of race package.
Yeah.
It's not the best car in every aspect, but it's the best car combined. He's had stages in his career where he hasn't had the best car and has still won races.
He's earned the right to have this car.
That's the thing. It is one of those where the better the driver, the more likely you are to be in the better car, because you're not going to have...
It's very unlikely if you're not a good driver that you get a good seat, and if you get a good seat and you're not worthy of that seat, then you certainly aren't in that seat for as long as someone like Lewis Hamilton has been.
Exactly, and he is always in that top end of the grid no matter what. Even if we'll go back to Germany quickly. He said that he wasn't feeling great. Look at his qualifying performance there. He wasn't 100%, qualified brilliantly. Race day, everything went wrong for Mercedes race day. But Hamilton had opportunities in that race. It is one of those where the cream rises to the top. The better you are, the better opportunities you are going to get within the sport. And that goes for every sport. It's not just in Formula 1.
Exactly.
And when you're in a sport like Formula 1 where they are the top 20 drivers in terms of that area of motorsport, because you can't turn around and say they're the top 20 drivers.
Well, that is, I'd say top 18. There might be two on the grid that certainly aren't worthy of the seat.
There are a few that you could say...
We'll come on to that in later videos.
But they're meant to be the pinnacle of the sport, and from that you are still going to have differing levels. It's not like you get to Formula 1 and then everyone's the same ability.
You have once in a generation talents, and it'll be when Lewis Hamilton retires, he will be remembered as one of the greatest ever drivers we've witnessed in the sport. And it's a bit like if you're a football fan of Ronaldo and Messi, you've just got to admire what he's doing while he's here, because he's not going to be here forever.
I am along the same lines as Toto Wolff when he discusses how Hamilton will be viewed in terms of the legacy he'll leave. You're not going to actually realise how good a driver he is
till he's gone.
And one of the things that makes Hamilton the driver that he is, I would say, is the character that comes with it. When you look back through the years, you have drivers like Alain Prost, who was quite methodical with how he would go about driving. Niki Lauda was the same. And then you have drivers like James Hunt, Jenson Button. They were real characters of the sport. And I would say that Hamilton is somewhere in the middle of both. He does
Yeah.
have that air about him that
I think the PR side doesn't come natural to him, but
No.
he does make an effort, and he does have a genuine feel and connection to the fans. You know, even though I think he struggles to portray it in, some people view it as not a genuine way, I think Hamilton has a genuine love, especially for his home fans, but anyone who supports him, and he loves doing the racing, and I think it's the people that keep him going. Obviously the records help as well, but
and he does come across as a genuine Formula One fan as well. So when he's having discussions about how he thinks the rules can be altered to improve racing,
He genuinely means that.
looking at that from an outside perspective, because you can't look at some of the comments he said and think, well, you're just saying that because you know that the Mercedes is strong in that area. It is, and I would say that the majority of the drivers on the grid have the same view when discussing things, but all of his comments are about improving the overall show, and that's what the sport is about.
He understands it's an entertainment. Anyway, we should get back to Hungary.
Yes.
That was obviously big up to Lewis. We defended him. We'll talk about him in following weeks as well, but it was just an absolutely superb one drive by Hamilton. I think it's only fair that we dedicate this much time to kind of admire what's been a brilliant first half of the season for him. So now we look at those kind of, that Red Bull, should they or shouldn't they have pitted? And I believe we are both on the they should have.
Yes.
But obviously we have the benefit of hindsight. But I think we believe they should have pitted at different points. So I'll let you go first.
I still believe they should have pitted straight after. It was one where Mercedes pulled an absolute strategic masterclass. No one was expecting that second pit stop from them. Yes, there was the potential where Verstappen would have been coming out behind Hamilton, because that outlap from Hamilton was spot on. But when you look at how Verstappen had been driving for the weekend and in the race itself, I think Red Bull should have put a little bit of impetus into Max and almost given him that challenge that Mercedes did to Hamilton. Bring him in. He wasn't going to lose places to the Ferraris. It was going to be the same result. I understand where Red Bull were coming from though, in the fact that Mercedes made the pit stop knowing that if it didn't work, they still had second. Red Bull obviously had the view that if it didn't work for them, they lost a race win. But they lost it anyway. So by coming in, they could have said to Verstappen, have
Go
some
get
fun.
'em.
And they could have even looked at changing it up slightly and going for different compounds and just seeing how it worked. But if they'd pitted him one lap after, that battle would have continued right to the end, and we would have seen Hamilton having to defend, which I always like to see, because I would say that Hamilton is one of the best on the grid with his defensive driving because of his racecraft. So it would have been good to see it being the other way round. But I'm going to say that one thing I did enjoy about the race was seeing the Mercedes as the hunter and the Red Bull being hunted rather than the other way round, which it has been for the majority of the season. And I'm stealing Christian Horner's words there, because I think it was a great way that at the end of the race, when you saw Max going up onto the podium, you had Christian Horner turn around and say it was great to be the hunted. So I just think they should have done it straight after.
So I also agree they should have pitted, but I don't agree with when. I feel like if they had pitted straight away, Mercedes had such an advantage on that first sector, and even if Max had DRS in terms of chasing down, the Mercedes had the advantage on the straight, and that first sector is the only real point you can overtake. I mean, I know Max is amazing at finding spots that are unusual to overtake on and making the move stick, but I think he would have found it difficult. What I would have done, up until about 14 laps to go, he'd maintained the gap at about 15 seconds, and we're averaging about 20-second a pit stop. So if they pitted then and put them onto softs, Max had been great on softs all weekend, and that would have then given him the pace advantage, because we saw actually Max put in a 1:17.1 on those softs when he put in the fastest lap, and when Hamilton was absolutely leathering it, giving everything he's got in those mediums, he still only got a 1:18.5, I think was his fastest lap from there. So I would have said 5-second gap, you can make that up, and then you're going to have the tyre advantage, which will then make it as easy as what Hamilton went round on Verstappen. It would have been, we can only speculate, but presume it would have been as easy for Max to get past, and then it would have been the ultimate counter. But I said again, I think, I was like, we don't have the race data. I don't know in terms of, they might have shredded those pair of softs. Obviously over the weekend, because they basically lost Friday practice, that it was basically blind in the race. They didn't really know. But I know Ferrari weren't necessarily under pressure, but Vettel made those mediums last a hell of a lot, and he made those softs last quite a long time as well. So I think he could have done it, and it probably would have been the best strategy in terms of making up that difference in quality in the cars in terms of straight line that would have got him past.
I'd say the only thing with that one is the potential for them dropping back into back markers, because that was the one thing that actually gave Hamilton that advantage. Was he came out of his pit stop and he had three back markers to get past, which he managed to do relatively quickly. I think it was 3-4 laps before it was past them. Once he was past them, it was clear for him to, and it did mean that he was able to continually put in those qualifying laps, because he wasn't coming up to anyone to stop him. So it's all if buts and maybes.
Exactly.
Really.
We'll never know.
No.
What we do know is Mercedes pulled an absolute blinder, and as much as they got it wrong at Hockenheim, you have to say they got it superb, and the pit stop was superb as well. It was really quick to get Lewis out. So,
which was surprising considering his first stop wasn't great.
Correct.
Front right didn't.
But when the pressure is on and the chips are on a great team like Mercedes, they do step up, it was just fantastic to watch. And like we said, it's what we want. We want to see the battle on the top. So I think that probably nicely rounds off the main event of the race, and we'll probably just kind of scope through the other incidents, probably starting off with Ferrari, who had their nice Sunday drive.
Yeah, and I stick by what I said in the reaction. They checked out for the summer break incredibly early. They
punched their ticket. They're on a beach in Sardinia somewhere.
I just don't understand what happened. The limited practice we had and in qualifying, they had that advantage in the first sector, which they should have done because of how their car is set up.
Yeah.
Which by Sunday was gone. They weren't even challenging for in that sector.
Exactly. I said it in the quality reaction, and they were so poor in that second and all sectors, to be fair, in the end. But you're like going, because they had such a strong performance in that first sector, you were like, that's where the overtakes happen. That's your best chance of getting past cars. They've got the advantage. You can't count them out. They could be challenging, and could you imagine us having that battle, but then a three-way battle if Vettel had been involved as well.
That's the thing. You were expecting that, yes, they would lose time in the second and third sector because their car just doesn't deal well with the combination of slow speed corners. That the Hungaroring is basically just a combination of slow speed corners.
Yep, lots of slow speed corners.
But you were expecting them to make up some of the time down the pitch straight.
Because it's a long one.
Through turn 1 and turn 2, because at that stage you're still building up. And then up the hill into turn 4. You were expecting them to be able to compete to some level. And Vettel finished on the podium, but finished over a minute behind Hamilton. And the only reason he was as close as he was to Verstappen as he was because Verstappen pitted to put fresh tyres on.
Yeah, I mean, they just didn't care. And I think we saw, one I'm going to say, absolutely incredible tyre management by Sebastian Vettel in terms of, did he go 40 laps on those mediums?
Something like that.
He went ridiculously long and then pitted for softs for whatever the final was. So it might have even been like 45, 50 laps that he managed to get out those mediums. But incredibly long, and then softs go there. But again, we kind of saw a strategy that favoured, and these are two circuits that Leclerc hasn't been his usual buoyant and happy self. He's not really like these circuits, and I think you can see that when in Q1 he smashed into the wall. No, was it Q1? I think it was Q1 where
Q1.
He went in and bumped the wall and damaged his something at the back of Leclerc's car. But moving on though, in terms of back to kind of the race, obviously Ferrari are looking at it and Mercedes and Hamilton are out of reach.
They are for the Ferraris in terms of the Drivers' Championship. They're out of reach of everyone in the Constructors.
Yeah, but they're probably looking at it in the drivers and they're going, we can catch Verstappen and we can catch Bottas. So, who's the closest? Vettel. We're going to prioritise.
The one thing I would say...
Which they've done all season, but...
Yeah, the one thing I would say is an issue with that strategy for Ferrari is that the prize money is paid out based on Constructors. And yes, Ferrari automatically get extra bonuses anyway because of being a historic team and all of the things that would be nice to be got rid of.
The wonders that come with being a classic team.
Exactly. So for them, they need to be making sure that they can consolidate second place in the Constructors. And the only thing that's going to their advantage in terms of that is that Pierre Gasly is not on Verstappen's level.
He's not on any level. It's probably fair. So Ferraris, probably a nice way to round them up in this race were beach mode.
And naughty Leclerc.
And naughty Leclerc. That was probably moving on nicely into that instant actually, in terms of I've seen helicopter shoots where they were trying to get the lines, so it's an aerial view and you see, and it kind of was, he drifted along to the racing line, Bottas, while obviously Leclerc was coming over to cover the corner. It was still a bit aggressive though, wasn't it?
It was, and I said it in the reaction that because it was the first lap, it was always going to be looked at as a racing incident. That first lap, you have cars that are so close together. If that had been in the middle of the race though, I think a penalty would have been given because it was an aggressive move. It was unnecessary. Looking at it, I don't think you can say he drifted across the track. It wasn't like his defensive attempt with Vettel where he came across the track gradually.
No, it was
a bit of a swipe.
It was a swap.
So
He might not have known he was there,
no,
but
it was more aggressive than was needed in that instance, because the way Bottas was going to be going into that corner lent itself nicely for Leclerc, because for turn 4 you want a nice swoop into the corner, because it is one of the, it's not one of, it is the fastest corner on the track, and it is a blind apex the way you approach it. So Leclerc had the better position going into that corner, so Bottas would have had to back out when they got to the apex, so he didn't need to be
it was an
that
unnecessary
aggressive
move
in defence.
and it's rather stitched up Valtteri Bottas's race. And so although we can give credit, we can give Bottas leeway in terms of that affected him. Early pit meant that he then was on an extra pit stop strategy, because obviously he wasn't going to last the race on his hard tyres from that point.
It would have been impressive time management to have managed it.
Certainly would have been. But he still had the fastest race package of the weekend, and they expected P6, and he wasn't able to achieve that.
No, and it was, when he first came out of the pit stops, he was lapping the same times as Verstappen and Hamilton. The minute he got to any form of traffic, it just stuttered. Then didn't really seem to be...
He didn't look like overtaking anyone.
No, he spent far too many laps battling with Ricciardo, and
spent far too many laps battling with Lando.
Just in general, whenever he got to a car,
he was like,
what do I do? And
it was like a barrier.
And when you see how fast the race package was for Mercedes, he should have been making faster progress against, I would say, definitely Ricciardo in that Renault. There's no way he should have been behind him as long as he was.
No, the Renault was an awful package this weekend.
Yeah.
So despite Ricciardo being a good driver and a good defender, Bottas should have cruised past that in terms of the difference of abilities.
Definitely.
In that, the differing qualities of those cars.
And that's the thing. There just didn't seem to be. There was all of the talk at the start of the season about Bottas 2.0.
Yeah.
And I would say since Hamilton got past him at Silverstone, it's gone back to the Bottas of last year. Even if he was to get out in front, I don't think he'd have the confidence in his own ability, even though he's coming out and saying that he thinks he's on the same level as Hamilton and he's up there. I don't see it. I don't think he has the confidence.
We'll discuss it in weeks to come, but I think Bottas can never be credited for anything more than a number 2, and that may be a harsh, but I think it's reality in terms of Bottas isn't of the level to fight for a world championship, and so Mercedes have to look at themselves and look at the last 2 weekends, and they go, do we want a solid number 2, or do we want a guy that is pushing Lewis Hamilton? And I think probably from reports coming out and probably what we feel as well, I think it's veering more towards the latter on that aspect.
The one thing that I would always say is going in Bottas's favour, and we will discuss it in future videos, is the fact that, as I said with Ferrari, the money the teams get is based on the Constructors' Championship. And as much as you can say that Bottas isn't on the same level as Hamilton, isn't going to consistently win as many races.
A knock-on or a Russell was a risk.
It is
Bottas, you know exactly what you get on the tin.
exactly. You've had it now at Mercedes for long enough to know that
He will deliver you second.
deliver you. He's always in
But-
and around the podium.
Will he? Because what they could also be looking at is Verstappen and Red Bull package now year on year is getting better, and earlier in the season they're improving more and becoming competitive earlier.
But
because it's usually
Mercedes are improving as well. And yes, the gains for Mercedes aren't as much, but that's because
they are.
they're ahead.
But if Red Bull sort out a driver, then you've then got potentially 4 drivers who would finish ahead of Bottas. Because if Ferrari sort out a package too, which I mean that is a flip of a coin, come the start of the season, it might be 2018 Ferrari, it might be 2019 Ferrari, we don't know. But if they get any sort of car together, they've got 2 great drivers there now. That Bottas is then starting to look like a Pierre Gasly compared to.
And we are gradually drifting into our next video with that.
We are indeed.
But I think we can quickly skate over some of the things we've decided for that video based on this weekend, because I think we agree on them, that there's going to be a lot of driver changes this season.
I think so. I think when we start the grid in 2020, there are going to be some new faces, or at the very least, faces at teams that we're not at currently.
Yeah.
I do not expect this to be a kind of everyone stays where they are. There will be changes.
Yeah, there were, I would say,
Oh, how mysterious! There will be changes.
it's as if we're predicting the future here, but there were quite a few drivers this weekend that were looking to either secure the seat they're in for next season or advertising themselves, and it didn't go as planned for them. So
No,
it wasn't the best shop window.
no, it wasn't. I think next point move on to is probably like I keep saying, Team Haas, look away now, because Toro Rosso's battle on track was an absolutely kind of poetry in motion of cars gliding through corners together, which is absolutely superb to watch. But it was utter respect between teammates who understand its ability, pushing their cars to the limits, fighting hard, Albon knowing when to concede the position to Kvyat, and then racing on from there. And it was superb and well done for Sky, because I know it can be difficult to miss that midfield pack, but they actually got all of it, and it was great to watch.
Number 1 rule of Formula 1: do not hit your teammate. It is as simple as that. You are teammates. Yes, they're your first point of call when it comes to competition, because they're the person that's in the same setup as you. But do not hit them. And as you say, it was like putting 2 cars on a Scalextric.
Yeah.
It was brilliant driving from both, and as you say, the respect not only to their teammate but to the team itself, because we've said it in previous videos that a lot more goes into a Formula 1 car than just the driver, and I would say it's probably the most disheartening thing you could have as someone who's behind the scenes when
The drivers take
each other out. So yes, Toro Rosso, well done. Kvyat and Albon, well done. Grosjean and Magnussen, start watching.
You've got a lot of homework to do over the summer break. Hey, get those thinking caps on.
The only advantage that Haas had this weekend was that Magnussen and Grosjean didn't spend too much time on the track near each other.
No, which was brilliant. Because Romain Grosjean retired with a water pressure issue.
retired.
I mean,
again,
I kind of said this. I was like, he's either doing something in the car now that he's finished only 50% of the races. Do you go, is it the way he drives the car, or do you just go that this man is the unluckiest man in F1?
It's got to be something to do with his driving style, because Magnussen.
When was the last time you heard of a water pressure issue?
I just think it's more the fact that look at the number of retirements when you compare Grosjean to Magnussen.
Although they are driving different specs, so. But Grosjean has finished most of those. Actually, no, he hasn't. But. I think
that team baffles me. Just in general, they've gone from being best of the rest.
Well, yeah, or very close to it last year in terms of they finished.
Well,
fifth,
at the end of the season,
yeah,
they have. Yes, in the constructor standings,
but they had the best car.
But at the end of the season, they had the best car. To now, only guaranteeing themselves being faster than the Williams on race day. Even the Racing Point that doesn't have a great race package.
I think they have to compare themselves to where Racing Point are, because they're a kind of similar sort of team, similar sort of resources, everything there, and Lance Stroll is kind of their Romain Grosjean for a different reason, in terms of Grosjean is a very talented driver but isn't able to express that talent because of the amount of races he doesn't finish, and Lance Stroll just isn't good enough for F1.
Well, yeah.
I think Sunday was the last straw with me, Lance Stroll. I'm going to be very unforgiving of him in future videos. I'm just going to go, say it how it is. He's only in the sport because his dad's there. So,
but it is. I would say there is now that clear distinction within the pack itself in terms of teams, and
the way it's going, Williams could be ahead of them.
Yes and no. I still think, whilst it was a great performance from Williams this weekend, it's a much shorter track,
and so they aren't able to build up gaps. Yeah, there's someone like Spa and Monza that would suit Haas.
The main issue for Williams
to kind of go long.
Yeah, and the main issue for Williams this season is the fact that the car's not very slippery. So the lack of straights helped them out a bit.
Yeah.
So
massively.
Yeah.
I think probably sticking on hard, there was just that one incident with him and Ricciardo. Obviously Ricciardo wasn't very happy about it, and I think we're both of the very much the same view of racing incident. It was hard defending, it was fair, and to be fair, Danny Rick's done a lot of that in his career as well. So
yeah, and I think it is also one of those where if you've got Daniel Ricciardo behind you, you're coming up to a corner, what are you expecting to happen?
The lunge.
A lunge down the inside, you're expecting it, and it's now drivers have cottoned on to the fact that Daniel Ricciardo loves to have a little bit of a dive into a corner. So yes, when it's coming to the stage of trying to get the lower points, because that's where the battle was, and that's where the battle is for the teams, you are going to get that little bit harder defending. When you're at the front of the grid and you're having those sort of dives, drivers are more thinking about, well, let's play the long game.
Yeah.
At this moment in time, you can't play the long game if you're a team like Haas or a team like Renault, because you need as many points as you can as quickly as possible, really. So
I think the best way to view this incident is look at Danny Rick himself. Ricciardo is frustrated. He's a driver who is 30, so this was his move anticipating to at least see progress from Renault last year, getting closer to those top three, so that when the 2021 rules came around, that they might be competing on the level and having 4 top teams at the top.
The move for Ricciardo to Renault was Hamilton's move from McLaren to Mercedes.
And
he's taken the step thinking about the progression the team can have rather than where they are now. But they've taken a step back, so the progression that he saw in the team is further away.
I think we'll talk about it in our ratings, but I would say that if I'm looking ahead to the future, Haas and Renault are the teams that I'm in big like. I don't see where your kind of results are coming from, because we've said it before, that Renault engine, how unreliable it is, and it's not a new problem. And you're going, look, the engineering side is very complex and far beyond either of our knowledge, and people paid a lot more money than what we are to kind of figure out those problems. But you're going, well, you're being paid a hell of a lot of money. How have you not figured out how to make this engine more reliable?
And we said it in race preview.
Might have done.
Or it might have been our review of Germany. You get points by finishing races. If you're not finishing races, you've got no chance of getting any points. So the reliability is something that does need to be recognised, and it's just Haas and Renault, I don't understand them, because both of them were there last season.
It's just an absolute. If someone said before a race was kind of completed, they came up to you and they went, after last year's performances, went, McLaren are going to be easily smashing best of the rest, and Toro Rosso are going to be 5th in the constructors, people would have laughed at you. But that's what's happened.
Yeah, and then you've seen the improvement of the Alphas, and the Racing Points now starting to.
I mean,
in the hands of Perez,
part of their upgrade.
Yeah,
I think.
In the hands of Perez, you're starting to see the improvements for the Racing Point. So, really, the only teams you can look at and say you can't see any clear progression from where they started this season are Renault and Haas. Even at the top.
I mean, and Haas's is even more clear to see, because Grosjean is in the Australia spec car, so the car that they started the season with, and that is performing better than Magnussen's car, at least on the Saturday as well. So it's just mind-boggling, and I think that probably covers the race, doesn't it?
The only thing we haven't discussed is Carlos Sainz. We haven't said anything in detail about him, and we've both said we want to talk about it,
and we need to, because I mean, it's actually quite funny that we've left it to the last to talk about Carlos Sainz, because he was a ghost in the race. I don't think past the first lap Carlos Sainz was seen in that race.
No, he went
about the finish line.
He went about his business almost, Alan Prost-esque. It was a very controlled drive, did what was needed, nothing more, nothing less. But
I think he did do more though, because he finished ahead of that Red Bull.
Only in the hands of Gasly, and I say only because
I know, but still, that car is set up to do well at a circuit with there, and it is still a top 3 team car. And just because Sainz is convincingly beating him in Gasly has been terrible, it is still. I mean, probably Lando would have beaten him if it wasn't for the pit stop.
Yeah. So I'm sticking by what I've said, and now I'm no longer going to be calling Carlos Sainz best of the rest.
So I'm gonna this will be ones for you guys to think of, and we'll talk about it because our 2020 prediction kind of mini series is coming up. Carlos Sainz was a Red Bull driver. I know he signed the McLaren contract.
But I don't see it.
If he continues having the second part of the season that he's had the first part, they're leaving it to the close season. Would they be tempted to just buy him out because he'd be a better option than both Kvyat and Albon?
But if you're looking at it in the fact of a driver coming back into the Red Bull fold, you had that with Kvyat because he was dropped from the Red Bull program completely. So they've already brought him back once. They've already brought one driver back. I don't see it happening again. And when you look at Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz, they've brought into the project.
It might be a different thing as whether he accepted it or not. But would you think it would be something that Red Bull was sitting in their meeting rooms when because they will be drawing up Gasly replacements this time because they're not going to be caught out like the Ricciardo sitch.
I think we need to leave that until the...
I think we do.
Okay. Last two things that we need to do for this video. One, very quickly, driver of the day.
Okay, so my driver of the day, Lewis Hamilton.
I'm going.
Oh my God, that's a lot. It seems like it's thrown your head.
I said quickly as well. I want to say Verstappen, but I can't see past that 21 second gap in 17 laps. I have to say Hamilton.
And I think it is, and I know. Look, Max was still an incredible drive, but like we were saying, analysing in the kind of harshest way because when you've got two guys as good as what those guys are, you have to analyse in a harsh way. The way that Hamilton managed his tyres there, that was the difference that allowed him to also be in control of that second because he was allowed to attack. Then Mercedes were allowed to see how that attack worked.
Yeah.
And then they were like, okay, that doesn't rethink, re-strategise, make the pit stop, incredible laps, quali laps. It was an incredible drive. Sainz was also potential up there for consistency, but
the three top drivers, and in the vote for driver of the day, the three top drivers were Verstappen, who got it, Hamilton, and Carlos Sainz. So we're looking. They were the three. I would say they were the three best drivers. Yeah. So
I mean, Kimi did an amazing drive in 7. But yeah, Carlos Sainz.
You could pick any one of those. You could pick any one of those three drivers, and make a sizable argument. As to who was driver of the day. Okay.
I think, but we both agreed, so that was kind of nice.
Final one. Last thing we need to do, only because of our predictions for it, are ratings for rookies of the race.
Ratings for rookies of the race. So I am going to go with rookie number 1. Lando Norris's return to his top spot. Rookie number 2, Alex Albon. Rookie number 3, although I think he had an incredible race weekend and 16 is great for him, but Albon securing more points for the Toro Rosso, and only if it was 1 point, still extending their lead over Renault, was, I think, just pips it for me. And then Giovinazzi, really poor weekend, and that's now 11-1. In terms of he's being beaten by Kimi Räikkönen in races.
Okay, for me, George Russell number 1. That Williams car, when you look at it in terms of Robert Kubica, was awful. You put it in George Russell's hand, qualified 16th, finished 16th in the
almost
race.
Got Q2.
Exactly.
Almost.
And had they risked it and waited a little bit longer, the way the track was rubbering in, I think we would have seen a Williams in Q2. But, has to be number 1. 2, Albon. As you said, more points for Toro Rosso. Yes, it was only 1, but his drive when battling Kvyat, and also his tyre management.
Maturity beyond his years, yeah.
And his tyre management as well, because Kvyat got to the stage where he was on the radio saying, these tyres are gone. So, Albon there. Lando Norris 3rd, just because I've now got higher expectations of Lando.
Yeah, but I think he still drove a very good race, and that his faults within the race were out of his control.
Yeah, and I'm not taking anything away from Lando.
It's nice that we disagree.
Exactly.
It's good.
But
we do agree on the last place.
Giovinazzi.
Terrible weekend.
But with Lando Norris, because of how Carlos Sainz is performing, and almost you look at his performances across the season so far, I'm starting to look at him as I'm expecting more from him. And yes, things were out of his control, but still some aspect of he could have done slightly better than he did. But it's good to see him back in the points and having a good race weekend. He put laps together consistently, and that's what you want from a driver. So
yeah. So that probably rounds up Hungary, guys. Again, another really exciting race for a different reason this time. It wasn't the all-out carnage of Hockenheim. It wasn't the kind of midfield and kind of just below the top, well, the kind of constant battles on tracks like Silverstone. But it was an absolute superb battle for the lead between Max and Hamilton. And it's the two drivers that we are going to love to see competing, hopefully lots in this second half of the season. I think probably a good point to suggest that's the summer break, guys, but don't you worry, we are here for lots of content. So
we got it all planned out, and
we certainly do.
We know what we're wanting to discuss.
So we've got a mini series, 2 of them coming out, of driver ratings. So we're going to break down with next week coming and 2020 predicted lineups. We're going to focus on the big 3 of Mercedes, Red Bull and Ferrari. So that is part 1 of the mini-series. Part 2, we will be looking at McLaren, Toro Rosso and Renault. And then the final part, we're rounding up the final 4 teams of Haas, Alfa Romeo, Racing Point and the Williams team. Also a good one for you guys coming up this weekend. So I'll be doing a W Series kind of overview before me and Ash are going to be at the W Series season finale this weekend at Brands Hatch, and we're going to be recording a vlog for you guys that will be going live on the Monday. We're quite excited to be going there. There's also the DTM series that we'll excited to see.
It's going to be a good It's going to be a good day. So we're going to have a variety of things going on throughout, and just
so guys, stick with us. Stay watching, please.
And we'll see you in Spa.
Yeah, we'll see you.
We'll see you beforehand.
We'll see you in front of the camera, talking about Spa. That's what we'll do. But yeah, lots to come over the summer break. So don't you worry, you F1 fanatics. There's plenty to come. So I think the only thing that's left to do, Ashley, is you F1 fans, remember, keep racing.